We waited in the car for a few moments, watching Van and his mysterious friend, the man who Vicky claimed she'd seen traveling with my dad years before, break into McCann Glass, an abandoned factory on the north outskirts of Chancellor. "Are you sure that's him?" I asked her. "Yes," she said without a moment's hesitation. "He looks exactly the same." "All right, let's go in," I said. "Paul, I don't think," she started, then trailed off. "You can wait here if you want," I said. "Look, in fact, it might be better if you did, in the event that someone drives by or gets nosy. I'll be okay." "Well, no one's gonna..." she protested before turning in her seat to face the factory's entrance. "Okay, I'll text if it looks like someone's coming." I got out of the car and popped the trunk, thankful for the fact that I'd left some tools in my car the last time we'd gotten a big shipment of amps at the studio. I picked out a crowbar and quickly dashed across the empty parking lot to the doors, which simply stood open. Whoever this guy was, and whatever he and Van were doing, it seemed they didn't really care about discretion. Every now and again, as a kid, Rich and I would stop by the Maytag plant in Galesburg to see my Uncle Gregory, for one reason or another. I remember walking in and being immediately unsettled by how gray it all was. The concrete walls and ceiling, the steel girders and walkways as high as amusement park rides, but sterile, cold, imposing. It was like a movie set in a weird way, just an endless, spiraling echo and din of men and machines. McCann Glass, shuttered for a quarter century, was like a different version of that world. The concrete and steel was all there, but it was an aging skeleton devoid of muscle, tissue, activity. Just a massive cave where only vague shapes could be defined in the darkness. Every sound echoing and distorting as it faded, lost in the sheer size of the place. And I took a few steps through the door before it really registered how dark it was. I had no choice but to take out my phone and turn on the flashlight, though I knew I'd be giving myself away. I didn't care. I walked carefully through the entrance hall that led from what I could see to a series of small, boxy offices and an old time clock area with dormant metal turnstiles. There was a massive metal panel covered in switches near the office. I figured it was worth a shot and began flipping them. A few lights came on here and there throughout the place, affording a bit more visibility, though out of dozens of those giant industrial hoods hanging from the ceiling of the place, only a scant handful came to life. More importantly, and perhaps curiously, the place still had power. Ahead and to my left, the corridor leading past the offices and into the production area was as wide as a city street, covered in graffiti. Dirty with rotted leaves and random garbage, along with enough dust and dirt to fill 10 sets of lungs. The place was obviously a haunt of some kind for bored kids and who knew who else. Standing in the middle of the corridor and staring up at the concrete wall was Van. His arms hung at his sides, and his slack jaw and staring eyes told me that something wasn't right. "Van?" I called, listening to my voice cycle into the concrete hull of the factory. "Paul," he replied, and his voice was blank, devoid of emotion or inflection. "What's on TV?" "What?" I replied. I stopped a few feet away from him. He didn't seem aggressive or even upset. He just stared, and when he spoke, he barely moved his lips, much less look at me. "I was watching TV," he said. "Van, do you know where you are?" I replied. "Do you know how you got here?" "John," he said. "This is where they make them." "Make what?" I said. "Windows," he said. "Reflections." "Right, yeah, this was a glass factory," I said. And though I knew the answer to my next question, I pretended I didn't, because I wanted to hear his response. "Did you walk here, Van? All the way here from your house?" "I don't know," he said softly, and he suddenly turned at the waist, shouting back into the warehouse, "Hey!" Something clattered in response to the sudden disruption, and it occurred to me that even in the middle of nowhere, such a place could be home to God knew what. The musty air stunk of mice and bird shit, probably thanks to a few broken windows near the ceiling. More striking was the aforementioned graffiti that covered almost the entirety of the walls. Everything from bubbly signature tags to ornate, highly detailed, sometimes unsettling illustrations of faces, buildings on fire, bizarre symbols here and there, and numerous fantastical, often horrifying creatures. One in particular depicted an old-time war scene with what looked like soldiers running into a dark, wooded area. It reminded me of the post office in Galesburg. It was a mural depicting events in American history from the Revolution to the 1980s, and it called that to mind. It looked like a grimoire in spray paint. Van, it's okay, I said. I took a step closer as he turned and looked at me, his eyes wide, his face stricken with unmistakable terror. I don't like them, he said quietly. Who? I replied. Them, he said, looking up again. I followed his gaze. Someone had painted an image nearly 20 feet high across the whitewashed cinder block, and around it was nothing else, in stark contrast to the rest of the visual mishmash, as though this particular image had been given a certain degree of personal space or respect. It looked like a child's drawing in a way, and it depicted what looked like three figures in what could only have been robes or gowns of some kind, and the stringy lines of hair made them appear to be female. On their heads were loops like halos that I soon realized was meant to be a crown with candles coming out of it. Their faces were obscured by what looked like tendrils of melting wax that had trickled down from the crowns over their heads, into their hair, over their features. I had no context for what it was or what it meant, but Van stared up at it as though it was an object of intense dread, something that one shouldn't look at but couldn't resist. His face wrinkled as he neared tears, and he held his hands up in front of his face as if to block the sight of the mural. I noticed the blood then, relatively fresh and smeared all over his palms, his forearms, almost up the shoulder of his short-sleeved shirt on one side. Van, I said, trying to keep the worry from my voice, what did you do to your hands? He looked at me with absolute confusion, then looked down at his hands, and I could see now that there were small cuts all over his wrists and forearms. I don't know, he muttered. I don't remember. It's okay, I said. Let's go outside, Van. Can you follow me? Where's your friend, the man you came here with? I don't know, he repeated, though he seemed fine with the idea of following me now, turning and taking slow, careful steps as we moved back toward the entrance hall. I really need to talk to him, Van, I prodded. Do you think you can find out where he went? Is he here somewhere? He's here, Van said, and then paused as if listening, before repeating himself. He's here. Where? I said, unable to keep the urgency out of my voice, and he looked pained as though I was yelling at a child. Where is he, Van? Where's John? Shh, he said, holding his finger to his lips. Or he'll hear us, and he'll follow us. But you came here with him, I said. He's not happy with me, Van said, his voice wavering a little. Why is that, Van? I said. I had him by the hand now, walking slowly by his side, speaking softly, trying to keep the anger blossoming in my stomach at bay. Because I know where he lives and what he's done, he said softly. I have to get home. I have to check on her. Check on who? I replied, and before he could answer, Van's body went slack and he fell to the floor in a heap. Van, I whispered as something loud clattered in the bowels of the factory now, followed by the sound of breaking glass, once, twice, 3 times, as if someone were shattering panes. And when the lights began to go out, I realized that someone was breaking the bulbs one by one. Van! I tried to wake him, and he was still breathing, but I quickly texted Vicky to call 911 and come inside. The doors burst open less than 30 seconds later, and she ran to where I knelt by Van's prone body. "What's happening?" she said, her voice shaking with panic, putting her ear close to Van's face, immediately launching into CPR, compressions, followed by mouth-to-mouth, and as a siren drew closer outside, Van's eyes opened, wide and darting, and he sucked in a deep breath, coughing and sitting up. "Vicky?" he said. "Paul?" He looked around in horror, his eyes wide, as though it was clear he knew where he was. "How did we get here?" "You came here," I said, looking behind us at the dark expanse of the factory. "With John. You don't remember?" "John's here?" His brow furrowed and unadulterated fear came back into his eyes. "We followed you, Van," Vicky said. "John was with you. Where is he now?" "I don't know," Van repeated, looking from Vicky to me and back again, his eyes pleading. "John knows something about my dad, Van," I replied. "I need to talk to him, okay?" He looked at me doubtfully. "You don't want to do that, Paul." "Why not?" I asked. "Because he'll get interested," Van replied as though I was stupid. "Don't let him do that. Don't give him more than he already has, please? Please." The doors opened and in came two EMTs with a rolling gurney, all business. Vicky and I stepped aside so they could have a look at Van, checking his vitals, asking him questions. We stared in silence as they helped Van to his feet, and Vicky poked me in the side. "Paul," Vicky said quietly. "Yeah?" I said. "There." She nodded toward the corridor with the mural, and at the far end, the moonlight was just so that it cast a broad, white swath through the broken skylights, revealing a bit more of the room. There were 4 floors above the main part of the factory, each with a walkway that went all the way around, and standing near the railing of the 4th floor, facing us, was a figure. Arms at its sides, doing nothing more than facing us, wobbling a little on shaky legs, as though whomever it was had neurological issues standing up straight or had just found their feet after waking up. I felt as though I was looking at something I wasn't supposed to see, as Vicky's fingernails dug into my arm. I don't know how else to put it. "Hey," I called into the echoey husk of the factory, as angry as I was unnerved. "John, is that you? Whoever you are, come down here. Let's talk." "I'm calling the police," Vicky said. "Wait." I watched the figure who stood, unmoving, watching us. "Hey," I shouted, "who's in here? John? Is that your name, John? Where the fuck is my father? $100 for anyone who'll come down here and talk to me." "Is that necessary?" I heard someone say near the entrance, and I gasped out loud, my momentary anxiety-driven bravery collapsing suddenly as a man wearing a plaid shirt tucked into dark jeans strolled into the warehouse, his thick, padded coat with a patch indicating that he was part of the Baldwin County Volunteer Fire and Emergency Services. I looked back and saw that whomever had been watching us was gone. "Aaron," Vicky sighed with relief, "what are you doing here?" "I heard the dispatch call and your name," Aaron replied. He was probably in his early 30s, if I had to guess, mildly unshaven, with a generally friendly look about him. While Vicky explained what had happened with Van, he never took his eyes off me. "Aaron Powell," he said, extending a hand, and I shook it, introducing myself. As he and Vicky exchanged uncomfortable, sheepish looks, I realized that I had obviously become a kind of third wheel. "There's someone in here," I said. "Okay," Aaron said. "I mean, this place has been a dumping ground for drifters and vagrants for 20 years and change. I wouldn't really recommend poking around in here, honestly." "We weren't," Vicky said, and I was surprised at how much I immediately felt appreciation for her defense of our being there. "Van Evans was here, and we were concerned that he was in trouble, so he came in. That's it." "Oh," Aaron said, and his expression said that he was still trying to parse the cast of characters. "So you saw Mr. Evans just go in here?" "Yeah," I replied. "It seemed weird. We didn't want him to get hurt." This is the second time you've been out here in a month, he sighed. Gonna have to get those offices cleaned out at this rate. Victoria, you should have known better than to come in here, but with the Carlyles last month and whatnot. I know, Vicky replied. It was probably stupid, but I can handle myself, and I wasn't alone. I can see that, Aaron said. Where are they taking Van? I cut in. Local hospital? Macomb? Where? McDonough District in Macomb, yeah, Aaron said, concern now replacing confusion in his voice. What's the story? I mean, what was he doing out here? Did he break in? It's a long story, I replied. I have time, Aaron said, never breaking eye contact. I couldn't tell if he thought I was a weirdo or if it was because Vicky was with me or both. I brought up a photo of my dad on my phone, the same one I'd shown Van. Have you seen him before? No, Aaron said immediately. Why? He's missing, I replied. I know he was here in Chancellor not long before whatever happened, and I'm trying to see what I can find. It's my dad. Oh, gotcha, Aaron said, the situation coalescing, and he relaxed his shoulders a little. I'm sorry to hear that. I wish I had more for you. You think Van knows something about your dad, then? In a way, yeah, I said. Look, you said the second time you've been out here in a month. Someone else break in here? Oh, Aaron replied a little absently. Yeah, a couple of brothers. These paint-huffing idiots who think they know something, you know what I mean? They're probably crack babies or something, if we're being honest. They give us hell from time to time. They got arrested out here about a month ago. Drinking, and it's not a pleasant story. But it doesn't have anything to do with all this. Just tell us, Aaron, please, Vicky said. It might be important. Aaron gave her a strange look, then shrugged and sighed. Okay, they were drinking hooch out here, some kind of homemade moonshine or something. They had this girl with them. They're probably 28, 29, I don't know. Too old to be diddling around with a 20-year-old college student at least, right? Anyway, they started a fire in here, and when we showed up, the girl was naked. She was high on something, and they'd been cutting on her. All high as crows. We cited them for public intoxication, but the girl was legal, so we couldn't do much. She turned out to be some freshman from WIU. They sent her back to the suburbs. Larissa something, Carver, Rodriguez something. Aaron's radio squawked, and he held up a hand, listening. He nodded to himself and responded 10-4 to the dispatcher. Hey, I'm sorry, they need me. Paul, good to meet you. Vicky, tell your mom I said hello. Look, I appreciate you all trying to help Van out, but maybe just avoid the whole crowbar to the door approach next time if you don't mind. I agreed, apologized, and we shook hands again. Aaron gave the factory a lingering, troubled look as we all walked out into the cool night. He slid behind the wheel of an ambulance, and despite the dispatch call, he watched and waited until Vicky and I had pulled away and were heading out east on Rudder Mill Road. In the distance and through the rear view, I saw his headlights heading out of the McCann lot and back toward town. Friend of yours, I trust? I said finally. Yeah, Vicky said quietly. Look, I'm sorry if I put you in an awkward situation, I said. Oh, you didn't. We're not together or anything like that. We're not now. She paused for a long time. What did Van say when you found him? What was he doing? I have no idea, I said. He was babbling about nonsense, I guess, talking about this John guy, our mysterious traveler, and how he didn't want me to talk to him. He seemed scared. There was this weird scene painted on the wall in there. Some budding graffiti artist in Chancellor, so you got that going for you. Who are these Carlyle brothers? Local dealers, small-timers, no one to worry about, she said. I mean, I didn't know about the thing with the girl, but they're usually just pests that keep the local cops busy, you know? Nothing weird, not usually. A lot of weird going around these days, I said. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I saw that I had 3 missed calls from my studio. No doubt my engineers wondering when I was coming back to Chicago, and one from Alicia's new number, along with a text. Patty had wanted to say hi, she said. We'll call another time. Fuck. We'd almost reached the intersection at Rudder Mill and the rural route that wound north into the barren fields and thick pockets of trees, and I took a left, pulling the car into the driveway of my dad's new house. My new house, I guess, for the time being. We sat in silence for a bit. I rolled the window down and let the cool night breeze drift through the car. When I was like 8 or 9, I said, I remember this kid I knew from school went missing. We weren't close friends or anything like that, but I knew him fairly well. And used to see him at the arcade at the mall. Anyway, I remember them telling us kids to be careful. Teachers and cops were all over the place for a few weeks. Parents were offering to chaperone kids home. It was a real thing. A couple of months after it happened, we were sitting around watching TV one night after dinner, and there's a knock at the door. My dad answers, and it was this kid's mom. She didn't look well. She was tired. She had bags under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't eaten. I remember my dad asking her what was wrong and if she wanted to come in. She just stood there, and when she saw me, she started crying and asking if I knew where her son was, just getting hysterical. It really freaked me out, and my dad ended up walking her back down the street to her house. Apparently, she'd done it to 4 of my other classmates that night, just going house to house. She was like out of body, just out of her mind with grief. It scared me. It scared the shit out of me. It stuck with me. In a weird way, I felt bad that I couldn't help her. Well, Vicky shrugged. I mean, what were you supposed to do? Oh, I know I couldn't have done anything, I replied. But it was just this shadow that hung over the rest of that school year, you know? It never went away. I wonder if my dad remembered that, you know, if he felt the same way about Tanner, just this shadow behind him, throwing everything off. There is another possibility, Vicky said finally. Which is? I replied. That none of this is about Tanner, she said, and that his note was referring to someone else. Jesus Christ, I groaned, but she cut me off. Paul, think about it, she said gently. I'm just saying, your dad thought she was alive. Clearly, or he wouldn't have posted that flyer, and if we follow that, his saying he killed her doesn't make any sense. Where did you get the Tanner story? Maybe your dad's friend was wrong? Vicky, I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice and failing. The sketches, that's her face in his notebooks. It's the same as the headline about her disappearance from the Quincy Register. At the very least, he thought it was her at one time. And if it's not her, then what the fuck was my dad doing out here? And who was he talking about when he wrote me the note? The answer's probably in there, she replied, nodding toward the house. I sat back in the seat and closed my eyes. I was so tired my head was practically spinning. I'd missed a call from my kid. I'd abandoned my job, and in some little part of my brain, some guilty little quarter, I just thought, fuck you, Rich. Fuck you for putting me through this. I need to go home, I said. Yeah, I gathered, she said. Do you want me to come in with you? No, I replied. I mean, home. Maybe it was stupid to even come out here the way I did. Like I just, Wild West my way into whatever he was doing and solving like a goddamn crossword puzzle. Meanwhile, my kid's across the fucking country. I just need to stop with this, maybe. Maybe I needed a distraction. You know? I don't know. I think I just need to let the police do their job. Stop running off on this wild goose chase. Oh, Vicky replied, her voice quiet. Just, okay. But leave tomorrow. It's 1 a.m. Don't try that drive now. She paused for a long time. I never meant to suggest that your dad was a bad guy, Paul. That's not what I was trying to say. Look, if you're headed out of here, I don't think that house is a great place for you to be right now. You want to crash on my couch? By 2 o'clock in the morning, I realized that sleep wasn't coming for me anytime soon, so Vicky made us some tea. She had a small, very nice little shotgun-style house just a couple of blocks south of Sunset Park where we'd spent the earlier part of the evening. She handed me a mug and held hers up. Cheers to another weird day. Cheers indeed, I replied. And listen, thank you for everything, showing me around, all of it, even if it is turning out to be... I don't know. It's just too much in my head, I think. You know, it's like every day now I think about my dad being gone and not knowing why, and there's all this stuff I want to do with my son, and he's gone, and I'm afraid he's wondering where I am, and it's just this sick, loop, this pattern I feel like I can't get out of. My parents, when they ran the motel, she said, it was this weird window into the world, you know? I got to see people coming and going for good and bad reasons, you know, weddings, funerals, whatever it is. And I don't know, I kind of liked the idea that there was a world out there I'd never fully know. I was okay with it, in a weird way. If you have to try to keep it from getting to you and just do what you can to make things better. But sometimes you can't do anything. I mean, it sounds corny, but you just have to have hope that things will work out. Well, that's easier said than done, I sighed. Vicky nodded. Isn't that what you tell your son? Yeah, I replied. Yeah, it is. You're right. You are wise, Victoria Chatham. I don't know about that, she laughed. Come Monday, I'm going to be vilified for handing out math worksheets, so I'll hang on to that one. You want more tea? I'm good, I said. Math worksheets suck. You can't sugarcoat that. I stood, stretched, and took our cups into the kitchen. What little moonlight there was through the clouds cut a white thread through her backyard, which was separated by a line of tall oak trees from the house on the other side of the block, and I saw a flutter of movement, a series of small shadows, short, moving in some loose formation. Vicky? I called. Come here. What is it? She said, joining me at the window. That, I said, near the trees. Did you see something? Where? She replied. She squinted, and for the slightest moment I saw her expression freeze in something like disbelief. Or maybe I was just tired. I don't think so. Probably an animal or something. I could swear I saw something out there, I said. Well, we get a lot of wildlife in the neighborhood here. Probably a coyote or a coy dog, she replied, affecting a jokey country accent. You ain't in the city no more, son. Okay, I laughed. I wasn't born in the back of a taxi, for God's sake. They have coyotes in the city. What the hell's a coy dog? It's a coyote-dog mix, she said, as though I was crazy for not knowing. They're more feral or something, I think. Kind of crazy. I don't know. She squinted into the distance, and there was nothing now that I could see. Coy dogs, I chuckled. Now you're just making shit up. No, she said, folding her arms in mock seriousness as she shook with laughter. Coy dogs are real. You should know this stuff. You said you used to come out here with your dad. Well, just a few times when I was a kid, I replied. I made some field runs with him. It was fun. I used to love looking at the maps and whatnot, but it wasn't like we were camping. We didn't have to worry about coy dogs, or whatever they're called. Look, I'm going to crash for a few hours before hitting the road, if that's cool. Can you just wake me up in a little bit whenever you wake up? I'll just crash on the couch. Thank you again. I don't stay up too late watching for coy dogs or anything, all right? I'm all caught up on coy dogs, she laughed. What I need is sleep. On that, we could agree. But I barely slept. I lay there for a few hours, tossing and turning before getting up for a glass of water and staring long out the kitchen window. Part of me hated to leave, even though I had to admit that everything I had seen and heard while I was in Chancellor didn't make sense. Not yet. The parts that did make sense were, at best, concerning. But I had to admit that I was conflicted over the way that I'd brought Victoria into it, even though she'd been willing. I thought about Alicia and Patty, and I guess some part of me sitting at my dad's workstation in his house when all this started felt like I was operating in some sort of vacuum, distracting myself away from living the life I should, trying to rebuild my marriage. Alicia always said I had a tendency to fixate on things, sometimes to a point of being unhealthy, and that was one of the factors that at least played a role in her finally cashing in the chips on our situation. That I was disconnected, that I wasn't proactive enough, engaged enough. I sleepwalked through my life. She actually said that to me once, in the midst of a tiff we had over an anniversary dinner mix-up. So maybe some part of me thought I deserved this, to be stuck in this loop of seeking what felt like impossible answers to things beyond my control, until I figured out how to free myself of it. But it wasn't healthy to think that way, and I knew that. Like Victoria said, I wanted to be able to tell my son that things could get better. I had to at least entertain the possibility that this would resolve, that life would somehow go back to something like normal, whatever that meant now. I finally fell asleep around 5 in the morning, and Vicky gently shook me awake around 9. I splashed some water on my face, and we drove to the Rudder Mill house, where I gathered up some of the paper mess from the basement, locked the place up tight, and hid the key under the porch where Vicky could find it if she needed to in my absence. We decamped to the Gold Star, where we burned down 2 orders of pancakes and sausage along with almost a full pot of coffee. Then I dropped her off with a hug and a promise that she'd check on the house for me and I'd be back in touch soon. I made a pit stop at McCann, where the doors to the old factory were still just hanging open. And I crept inside just long enough to take some photos on my phone of the murals I'd seen the night before. Then I rolled out of town on Highway 67, and just like that, Chancellor was behind me. It felt good to be home. My backlog at work was embarrassing. So many works in progress, but also a lot of good wishes and questions about my dad from family members, friends, my engineers, and studio techs. I had some messages from Patty on my studio line asking who I was recording, telling me that he missed me and he loved me and where he and Mommy had gone that day, and messages that made me want to start drinking and never stop. For about a week, I was able to mostly ignore my notes about my dad, Tanner Parsons, Van, the Rudder Mill house, all of it. I was grinding 12, 13, 14 hours a day at the studio, trying to get my head back in the game. I felt like I did an okay job of it, but to say it wasn't a struggle would be a colossal lie. I talked once to the police, who didn't really have much more to go on, but they'd expanded their search and notices had been issued to Indiana, Missouri, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Tennessee state police departments in hopes that someone would find something. I knew what that meant. Concurrently, I saw that the Illinois State Police had been brought in to try to locate Margaret Summers as the search and her family grew more desperate. Her face appeared on the 9 o'clock news in Chicago, and some shots of her family and other concerned residents combing the woods for her. Woods that I now recognized. I was angry. I was angry at my dad for being so reckless with whatever this was, for not looping me in, for continuing to treat me like a fucking child in adulthood. I felt lied to, like the entirety of his last few years had been one giant sin of omission. Victoria emailed me a few days after I got home, asking how I was doing, saying how much she liked hanging out, joking about how boring things were without me there to harass the locals, along with a recipe for a pork marinade she said was so good it would make me hallucinate. I emailed her back and thanked her, said I'd give it a shot and I'd tell her what it made me see. It was strange, in a way, to have met someone that I liked that much and wanted to talk to in all this. I went out more nights than I stayed in, a side effect of my job, in a way. Checking out bands, seeing friends on tour, drinking. Since Alicia left, I had little else to really care about. Victoria felt like something of a wild card stuck into all of it, though we barely knew each other, and after just a few days back in my regular life, my little road trip felt a bit like the result of manic energy and my relentless worry and concern over my dad and where the hell he'd gone, as well as just the general anxiousness I felt at having my family taken out from under me. It was 9 days after I arrived in Chancellor for the first time that I decided to sit down and go over the rest of the stuff I'd saved from the library there and the piles of stuff from the basement. 9 days. I sat at my kitchen table, having a pastrami melt from a deli near my apartment, the radio blurting out bursts of frenzy as a World Series playoff game hit the 8th inning. A stack of photos, papers, articles, all of it made me remember that there was more work to be done at my dad's house, but I wasn't sure when I'd have that in me. I also had no interest in telling the police what I'd found there. For the time being, it would keep, and I wasn't interested in having everything get ransacked on top of everything else, answering questions about my dad and a bunch of missing persons I knew nothing about. And the middle of what looked like an Office Max that exploded in the middle of my kitchen, sat the little wooden doll I'd found, buried at the burned house. My eyes kept returning to it. What seemed so familiar about it? Why did I feel like I'd seen it before, though I had no memory whatsoever of when I would have ever come into contact with it? As I perused, up popped 3 emails from Vicky. "Hey," the first one said. "Got a bunch of old pictures from my mom I'd forgotten about. We'll scan and send anything of interest. Hope all's well in the city. Watch out for coy dogs." The next email had the subject, "Tell me my hair wasn't cool, punk," followed by an emoji smiley face. The photo attachment was just a high school yearbook picture of Victoria, who sported a heavily gelled comb-over faux hawk. It called to mind any number of singers and goth or punk bands from the 80s. She was indeed a little Midwestern Susie Sue. It was cute. She was cute. The final email had no subject, just a message and an attachment. "Girl in back corner is Tanner," it said. 63, would have been about 7. I'll send more if I find them. The picture was a so-so scan of an actual film print, and in it were about a dozen children in a classroom that was decorated for what looked like a Halloween party. The kids were in various states of costume dress. A few weren't dressed up at all, save for a little makeup or a cheap mask around their necks, and Tanner was among that number. She wore a wisp of a smile and had what looked like a plastic bone pinned into her thick, wavy brown hair, a kind of lei around her neck. My guess was that her costume was a witch doctor or something of that nature. As further evidence of that, in one hand she had what looked like a little toy shrunken head, one of those type of things you could order from the back of comic books in the 60s and 70s. In the other, she held a familiar wooden figure of a woman holding a child's bassinet. I stared at it. It was the same. It had to be the same. And I picked the thing up off my table, turned it over to look at the initials. TP, 1963. It was the same. Why had it been buried at that house, almost 40 miles from Chancellor in Galesburg? While the pictures I'd taken in Chancellor started importing to my cloud account, I pored over the picture. Who were the other kids? Did they still live in the area? Had they scattered like leaves to various corners of the country, the world? Did they remember Tanner Parsons? Did they know what happened? Whatever it was that happened? I realized that I hadn't stuck the fence posts in the solid ground, as my dad would have put it. That's where I should have started. Anyone in town who might remember who she was when whatever happened happened. Van hadn't even lived in the area at the time. I opened my phone and texted my studio assistant, asking if he could engineer the next couple of week sessions, and then made a list of everything I'd collected from the basement and the library. Fuck it. If I couldn't find anything more specific on Tanner, then I'd work around it. As I scribbled, the picture of the mural depicting the 3 darkly angelic figures from the McCann factory filled my screen. I stared at it. Minutes passed, and I couldn't take my eyes from the image, as though there was something in its composition that issued a dare of some kind. Why the glass factory? Why had Van gone to McCann in the first place? Where did his cuts come from? All over his hands and arms. Had he gone to McCann to lead us there? The thought made me uneasy, but I tried to logic my way through the options. There had clearly been someone else in the factory, given the sounds we heard, whomever had been watching us. Had someone simply used Van to lure Vicky and I there? I remembered what Aaron and Vicky had said about these Carlisle brothers who had been arrested at the factory just a few weeks before. The girl they'd been found partying or doing whatever with. What had Aaron said her name was? Rodriguez? Larissa something. Rodriguez or Cheney or something. I did a quick Google search for Larissa and various combinations, and thanks to some social media links, came up with a Larissa Chavez, a 20-year-old student who attended WIU from Arlington Heights, a suburb on the far northwest side of Chicago. Maybe it was nothing, but one thing Aaron had said about the bizarre arrest gave me pause. That they'd been cutting on this girl. It was too similar to ignore. I found Larissa's Facebook page, and my hope gave way to something else. Larissa's profile was public, and at the top of the page was a message from Larissa's mother, indicating that memorials to her daughter could be left there by anyone who knew her or wanted to share a memory. I felt sick to my stomach as I scrolled through the wall of messages from friends and family. Larissa Chavez was dead. I read through some of the messages, deciphering the chain of emojis, the hastily written tributes, some in all caps that went on for full paragraphs, some short and sweet. "I can't believe you'd do this," one said, "when all you had to do was talk to me." Back to Google I went, where a couple of short articles from the Sun-Times and Tribune told part of the tale. Larissa Chavez had abruptly left school and moved back home, where, just a few days in, she cut her wrists in the bathtub after her parents had gone to work. Timing it all out, it seemed like it had occurred a week or so after the incident with the Carlisle brothers and Chancellor. Her mother, Olivia, gave a tearful statement to media about the pressures of being young in America, the need for mental health services, all the things you'd expect a grieving parent to say. I couldn't even imagine. But I also knew deep down that there was more to this than was in the paper. There had to be. It was easy enough to find Olivia Chavez through her daughter's Facebook page, and she'd linked her phone number with her account. When she answered, her voice deeper and rougher than I'd imagined from the tenderness of her press statement, I told her who I was and why I was calling. That her daughter had possibly crossed paths with my missing father, which was more than a long shot, but it was all I had. She listened. She didn't have to, and I was grateful. But she said she didn't know what she could really tell me. Larissa had always been a bit of a wild child, and that college had overwhelmed her in a way, with constant access to parties, guys, alcohol, the experience as a whole. I asked her if she'd been aware of anything strange happening to Larissa, if there was a change in her personality, something unusual in any way. She was quiet for so long that I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, "Hold on." I heard rustling, a door opening and closing, and then she returned, her voice quiet and even lower. "Her dad wouldn't want me talking to anyone," Olivia said, "but I told him something was wrong. I told him. When she got home, she was different. She was quiet, sullen, nervous. She said she was having bad dreams about all sorts of horrible things every night, that she couldn't sleep." "Did she say what the dreams were about?" I asked. "Only that there was a man following her, and he was on fire," Olivia said. "She was trying to hide in all these places, and he was following her, from a church to a factory, a house in the woods, a graveyard. She couldn't get away from him, and he carried this big watch on a chain, like those old-fashioned pocket watches. And he walked funny, like he had trouble walking or standing up." Trouble walking. "Did she say the man's name?" I said. "No, just that he looked like a man," she said, "but he looked like different men sometimes. It was scary, even to hear her talk about it. She said she'd never get away from him, that they made sure she'd never get away from him." "Who?" I said. Who was she talking about?" "I don't know," Olivia replied. "She started taking pills to sleep, but they didn't work. Nothing worked, and then she did it. I think she tried a few times before she actually went through with it, but she finally did it." At this point, Olivia Chavez dissolved into racking sobs, and I consoled her, let her compose herself before asking a question, the answer to which I dreaded at some level. "What do you mean she tried a few times?" I asked. "She had cuts," Olivia replied, sniffing back tears, all over her arms. "These designs, lines, but they made shapes, you know what I mean?" I described the symbol in my dad's notebook, the one that had been carved into Tanner Parsons, and Olivia drew in a sharp, deep breath. "How did you know that?" she said quietly. I made up a quick lie that it was a social media challenge or something and thanked her for her time. I hung up and barely made it to my kitchen sink before vomiting, shaking as I caught my breath. As it was, I'd spent the better part of another day going through pictures and articles, everything, making notes, and it was almost 6 o'clock. I chugged a few glasses of water, then microwaved some leftover pizza and sat down on my couch, mindlessly flipping through TV channels as I tried to process everything. My brain felt like a bowl of spaghetti, just a scramble of connections and lines and images and things that almost fit together. I picked up the book that I'd found at the motel in Swan Creek, the tacky little paperback about the Mothman that apparently had been my dad's at one point. I read a little here and there, mostly passages containing information I'd heard before. The collapse of the Silver Bridge, the disturbing sightings of suited, governmental-looking men asking strange questions of the people in Point Pleasant in the days immediately following. The man known as Indrid Cold and his strange, stilted way of interacting with those who had crossed his path. She said she'd never get away from him, Olivia had said, that they made sure she'd never get away from him. I assumed Larissa had met the Carlyle brothers, though there was no way to know now, and of course it could have been nonsense. I mean, she could have been depressed. Maybe she'd simply been the victim of sexual trauma or something, hidden her suicidal tendencies from her parents, which wasn't unusual. Tragic, but not unusual. She was trying to hide in all these places, Larissa had told her mother, and he was following her. My dad's handwriting stared me down from the inside back cover, the list of names I couldn't make sense of, along with that bizarre notation, JB equals IC. I stared at the moon-faced man on the page he'd marked. Indrid Cold. If JB was the same as Indrid Cold, then who was JB? The man we'd seen with Van? John B? I couldn't help but consider. Strange behavior, stilted movement, odd clothes. He'd led Van there for a reason. The same place where Larissa Chavez had been with the Carlyle brothers, where she'd picked up wounds like those that appeared on Tanner Parsons, according to Hugh. For what purpose? To mark her, somehow? Whatever had happened, it had led her, surely, to take her own life. I closed the book and sat in silence for a long time. On the table in front of me, I'd stuck a post-it reminder to myself on the Chancellor Library newsletter to call them the next morning and ask for anything they had on Clement McGill, the boy who it seemed had been the victim of some sort of accident during the Rudder Mill Festival. I thumbed the little newsletter and scanned it for anything interesting. Story phone caught my eye again. Maybe I'd pass the number off to Patty. He'd get a kick out of it. On a whim, I dialed it myself. A little chime played as soon as I finished dialing, and a little melody, followed by a woman's soft, kind voice coming over the line. "Welcome to Story Phone," she exclaimed, and you could hear the smile in her voice. "Today's story, The Bear Who Hid." I nursed my beer and listened.
Once upon a time, there was a bear named Oscar. And Oscar the bear was very shy, you see, so he found all sorts of places around where he lived to hide. One day he saw another bear he didn't know walking through the woods, and the bear was calling his name. Oscar! Oscar! Oscar got so shy that he hid inside his favorite place to play, his treehouse. Oh no, he said to himself when he got inside. I got so scared that I hid in the easiest place to find me. And sure enough, before long he heard a tap, tap, tap at his door. Oscar closed his eyes and hoped it would go away, but it came again. Tap, tap, tap. Finally, Oscar crawled out from his hiding place and said to himself, I have to be a brave bear. And with that, he opened the door. Hello, Oscar, said the bear, and lo and behold, it was his mama bear. He'd been so scared when he'd seen the bear coming through the woods that he didn't even recognize her. It's time for dinner, Mama said, and together they left the treehouse and went back home. And from that day on, whenever Oscar felt shy, he just told himself to be a brave bear. Goodbye.
Maybe a little on the saccharine side for my son, I thought as I hung up, but still a neat little gimmick. My eyes were heavy. It was almost 8 o'clock now, and I felt sullen and pissy, an ache in my bones and brain. I wished for something in my life to feel like it wasn't in some kind of code I couldn't solve, so I did the only thing I knew might make me feel better, though it stood just as much of a chance of making me feel worse. I rolled the dice and called Alicia. She answered, sounding tired, and I asked her if I could talk to Patty. Her parents had taken him out for dinner, she said, but she let him know that I called, and she asked how I was doing. I lied and said I was fine, that things were just really busy, and I apologized for not being available when he called last time. It's okay, she replied, and she chuckled a little. He wanted me to ask if you could send him some Black Widow comics next time. There's a girl at school he wants to impress, and she's obsessed with Scarlett Johansson. I said of course I would. When Alicia was tired, her voice sounded thin, in a way that reminded me of late nights in our bed when Patty had colic, sharing a laugh about something that had happened that day, our exhaustion drawing us into each other in those times in a way that had made me just feel bulletproof. Now it made me want to close my eyes and just fade away. We chatted for a few minutes, both sounding stilted and pained, but oddly pleasant, and then we hung up. I lay down and closed my eyes, and I dozed off pretty quickly. The dreams came at me hard, my head downloading everything I'd taken in over the last week or so. I was standing on a highway, and there was nothing that I could see for miles in any direction. There were towns clearly on the horizon, but they never got closer as I walked toward them. Then I was standing on a bridge that spanned a narrow, dry creek bed, and I could hear the sound of something stirring under the bridge, an animal maybe, or something else. Something with a terrible shadow cast across the creek bed, a shadow that made no sense. Victoria and my son were there, sitting on the edge of the bridge, kicking their legs, and Victoria reached up to playfully pinch her nose like she was diving into a pool, slipping off the edge before I could reach her, and she took Patty with her, both of them pitching over the side of the bridge, but the creek bed was dry, and there was... I woke up abruptly with a hell of a head rush and groaned. It was 1 a.m. The TV had switched from reruns to a late news broadcast.
The disappearance of 14-year-old Margaret Summers, but police in the area say they may have a significant breakthrough in the case. A person of interest has been identified, and while police aren't yet releasing many details, WGN has learned that the man is 67-year-old Chancellor resident Vangelis Evans. An anonymous tip to local police regarding suspicious activity on Evans' property led to the positive identification of bloody clothes belonging to Summers. Summers has been missing since September 14, when she didn't return home.
You have been listening to Cicatrix, Episode 5, All That Vanishes, All That Remains. Cicatrix is a production of Sensory Eclipse Media with funding from the estate of Vincent Galt, and has been transcribed and produced by Christopher Bevard. For more information on this and other podcasts from Sensory Eclipse, as well as more information regarding the ongoing mystery of Richard Harmon's disappearance, please visit www.sensoryeclipse.com. Original music and score by the Crone Hex. Check them out at thecronehex.bandcamp.com. Thank you for listening.
Hi, everyone. This is Christopher Bevard, the founder, producer, and transcriber of Cicatrix. On behalf of myself and everyone at Sensory Eclipse Media, I want to offer a heartfelt thanks for the awesome response we've had to the first few episodes of this unusual podcast. I don't know about you, but I love mystery stories and horror stories, and I always have. And when the two can come together, nothing makes me happier. I'm continually amazed by the mysteries we discover in the world around us all the time. They're there to be had if you look closely, so it means a lot to us that you decided to look closely at the story we're telling here. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be back in February with the back half of Season 1. Trust me when I say that if you're enjoying the ride so far, you will not want to miss what's coming. In the meantime, check out www.sensoryeclipse.com/Cicatrix. We'll be posting some scans of items that were found among Paul Harmon's effects, and you may find them interesting as we join in the hunt for Richard Harmon and Tanner Parsons. As always, if you have thoughts on Richard Harmon's disappearance or just observations on anything in the podcast so far, feel free to reach out at sensoryeclipse@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you haven't subscribed as yet, please consider clicking that button and leaving a review. After all, the more ears we have on this, the better. Thanks to the Prismatic Earth Collective for their assistance, as well as the estate of Vincent Galt for helping to provide the resources necessary for transcribing the recordings discovered in Paul Harmon's car. And thank you, listeners, again. We hope you'll stick with us when we return in 2024. In the meantime, spread the word, and we'll be back before you know it.